He is a member of the New Jersey Hall of Fame. He'll be at the Bergen PAC in Englewood on June 22nd. It is a pleasure to welcome Tommy James here to All Mixed Up. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. Great to talk with you.
And, we were talking before you came on the air, pretty much the entire music community in mourning over the passing of not one, but two giants this past week with Sly Stone,
Three.
right?
There's three of them.
And Brian
Rick
Wilson,
Derringer,
Rick Derringer as well.
right, and Sly Stone. And it's just hard to get your mind around all that, isn't it? On my radio show on Sirius, I'm going to be doing a little tribute to all three of them. And I can't believe losing three icons at once. It just shows you where we're at. I guess that we're all getting older, but it sure is awfully hard to get your mind wrapped around that.
When you think of Sly and the Family Stone, music can be passive. We listen to it in the background. We have maybe the radio on while we're driving or while we're working or whatever. But you hear a song like Dance to the Music, and boy, that is anything but passive.
Oh, right, and everyday people. Uh, well, the more I learn about Sly Stone, the more amazed I am all the time. He was a big time producer before he was ever a big star. He produced people like the Beau Brummels, records you would never in a million years associate with Sly Stone. But he produced all kinds of artists, and he was a real musical genius, for real.
And Rick Derringer had a similar thing with the McCoys. Hang On Sloopy,
That's
another
right.
song that jumped out of the radio. And then further into his solo career, you get a song like Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, which
Right.
demanded your attention.
And Rick and I used to hang out together down at a club called The Scene, Steve Paul's Scene in New York City. And he was always in there, and so was I. And we used to, hang out and talk, have great conversations about the music business. And so I miss him a lot,
You were
on a
mentioning
personal level.
you were mentioning to me before we came on the air that you had done over the years past a number of shows with the Beach Boys. What kind of an effect
Right.
did their music and Brian Wilson's music? I know he wasn't with the group at that point, but what kind of an influence did Brian's music have on you?
Well, first of all, Brian was also a genius. There's just no getting around it. The things he was able to do and his productions of things before really people were into record production. He was doing it, and he would with his harmonies. He was a kid who spent a lot of time in his room listening to the radio, as a lot of geniuses do. And uh, Brian's music was so different from anybody else's. First of all, it was intellectual. I mean, the construction of it, the chord progressions, and the if you're a musician, you really can appreciate the harmonies and the things that he would come up with. And um, uh, an album like Pet Sounds, for example, which uh, that was all Brian. That was all him. And I'm so sorry that so much of his life was rather unhappy. Uh, he had a lot of problems and a lot of things that he didn't deserve because uh, he was so sensitive and he was so in tune with his surroundings and things around him. And I really felt bad for him that so much of his life was troubled. And I'm very sorry to lose him. I was great friends with the rest of the Beach Boys. We worked together fairly often, and I remember the first time I was going to do the Ed Sullivan Show in '69. They had been on a dozen times, and I was picking their brains on, exactly what to expect because I was scared. I mean, because, you screw up the Ed Sullivan show, your career could be over. It was live TV. So Carl, particularly, because Carl and I wrote a couple of songs together, and I would ask him, what happens Monday? What happens Tuesday? Because it was basically a weekly project. And then, of course, a couple of them were actually in my hotel room when we were being announced by Ed Sullivan that we were going to be on the following week. Of course, Ed gets up and says, "Now for the youngsters, right here, Tony Jones and the Shondells." I I swear to God, Tony Jones and the Shondells, which means he can't read and he never heard of you. So. So, I mean, Engelbert Humperdinck, he has no problem with. James can't get, you know what I'm saying? So, at any rate, that was my experience with the Beach Boys, and I will miss Brian terribly.
Your song "Hanky Panky," the song you did with Tommy James and the Shondells, was one of the first songs when I was putting a garage band together that we
Me
ever
too.
did.
Me too.
What was the stuff that you were listening to as you're putting your band together for the first time? Who were you listening to?
Oh, other garbage. You know what I'm saying? So I, I, well, I shouldn't say that. Basically, my first rock heroes were, the first generation rock heroes, Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Rick Nelson and all of the people who, Gene Vincent, Buddy Holly, all of the first generation guys who invented modern rock and roll. And also, the Beatles had just come on the scene at that point. We recorded Hanky Panky. I did with my high school cover band back in a radio studio in Niles, Michigan, my hometown. And I remember vividly the night we did the record. And I don't mean to get too long-winded on this, but I just wanted to give you a little history. We made the record in late '63, and I had heard another band play Hanky Panky, a group called the Spinners, not the R&B group, but I mean a local group in Michigan. And so and I saw what the song Hanky Panky did to the crowd. I mean, they immediately were on the dance floor, and every time they played it 4 or 5 times that night, and the place exploded every time they played Hanky Panky. And so I said, "What the hell is that?" And so I was working in a record shop at the time. I go back, and we discovered that Hanky Panky is on the flip side of a record by the Raindrops called "That Boy John." That was Jeff Barry and Ellie Greenwich, by the way. And so, but when John Kennedy was killed, because it was about That Boy John was about JFK, and when he was killed, the record, of course, was immediately taken off the market, and Hanky Panky was on the flip side. So it was really a rarity, and but I remembered what it did to the crowd, and so I had a little record deal at the time, and we went into the studio and cut what I could remember, which was "My Baby Does the Hanky Panky" 104 times. We made up the little thing in the middle, down the line thing, and but I never had heard the original record till several years later, and it was nothing like what we did. So anyway, the record came out on a little label, Snap Records, and but we had no distribution, so it kind of came and went. It was, big record locally, but that was it. So 2 years later, I graduate from high school, and I'm 65, and I take my band on the road, and we're playing clubs throughout the Midwest. And in early '66, I'm playing this dumpy little club in Janesville, Wisconsin, And right in the middle of my 2 weeks, the guy goes belly up. He gets arrested for not paying his taxes. So the club is closed. We get our equipment. I go back to Niles. We're all feeling like real dogs. But that's how the good Lord works, because as soon as I got home, I got a call from Pittsburgh that changed my life. Disc jockey and the distributor in Pittsburgh told me that this fluky record, Hanky Panky, that I'd made 2 years ago, was sitting at number one. Only in America. Only in America. And what happened, they had bootlegged 80,000 records and sold them in 10 days. It was a local club record and a hit. And this disc jockey was playing it at his dances, and one thing led to another, and the thing became a local hit in Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh was a major market. So all the trade papers had Hanky Panky listed in a major market. And a week later, I went to Pittsburgh and did some local stuff, and then picked up a new group with Shondells. And a week later, we're in New York trying to sell the master, and we got a yes from everybody. Literally, CBS, Epic, RCA, Atlantic, everybody wanted Hanky Panky. And the last place we took the record to was Roulette Records. And so I didn't know anything about Roulette's reputation at that time. I found out later. So at any rate, the next day, I'm feeling great. I went to bed that night thinking we're going to be with Columbia, we're going to be with Atlantic, one of the majors. And so the next morning, about 10 o'clock, I start getting calls from all the other labels that had said yes the day before. And every one of them said, listen, Tom, I'm sorry, we got to pass. I said, what do you mean you got to pass? I thought we had a deal. And Jerry Wexler up at Atlantic Records told me the truth, that Morris Levy, the head of Roulette Records, had called all the other record companies and scared the hell out of them, backed them down, said, this is my record, back off. That's just how he talked. So we apparently were going to be on Roulette Records. And the first offer I couldn't refuse. Of course, we found out later that Roulette was a front for the Genovese crime family, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, that's how my career happened. But they took the record then to number one, and I had 23 gold singles on Roulette and 9 platinum albums. So if we had gone with one of the majors, I can tell you right now, we would have been turned over to some in-house A&R man. That's probably the last anybody would have heard from us. At Roulette, they actually needed us. So anyway, I'm sorry to get so long-winded on you, but I wanted to tell you the Hanky Panky story.
You know, your early career, you're doing, as so many others did, songs written by others, and you mentioned Barry and Greenwich right there. Within just a couple of years, you start writing more and more. And like, I think the Crimson and Clover album is almost entirely your writing, and that is light years away from stuff like Hanky Panky and Mony Mony.
We were very fortunate to have a fan base that sort of traveled with us through our career. Basically, at Roulette, we were given tremendous freedom to do whatever we want, to be in control of our own career. And we were allowed really to morph into whatever we could become. Getting paid was another story, but crime doesn't pay, you know. So at any rate, we were very fortunate to have radio track with us through all those changes. And you're right, it's a million miles away from the stuff we started out doing. I also was very fortunate to have Bo Gentry and Richie Cordell as producers. Brought them over from Kama Sutra. Remember Kama Sutra Records?
Sure.
Over from Sutra, and set up a really nice little production team with Jimmy Wisner doing the arranging, and he was our George Martin. Jimmy was our George Martin. And we had a nice little group. our engineer, Bruce Staple, and we were very fortunate to just keep having hits. We were, by the way, a creation of radio. Radio created us. Some acts, are great singer-songwriters, some of them great concert acts, but we had radio. Thank God. Radio was always good to us. And that's really, more than anything else, the reason for our success.
Well, the legacy of your songs continues to this day. You can get all of the information at TommyJames.com. And again, coming to the Bergen PAC in Englewood this coming Sunday, June 22nd, and then a little bit later on in the summer in Morristown at the Mayo Performing Arts Center. Tommy, thank you so much for your time and sharing your memories with us this morning here on All Mixed Up. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Great talking with you. God bless. Bye-bye.